Imagine this. A police officer pulls over a black man on a quiet street early in the morning. What followed would spark a $30 million lawsuit and tear open a web of corruption no one saw coming. Stay with us as we uncover the shocking truth, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from as this mystery unravels so you don't miss what really happened. It began as an ordinary morning in Atlanta, Georgia. The sun had barely risen when Judge Marcus Ellison slid behind the wheel of his Mercedes, heading home from an early breakfast meeting. At 52, Ellison carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had spent decades living and breathing the law. Once a young public defender fighting tooth and nail for forgotten clients, he had risen to become one of the most respected judges in the state. To the community, he was the people's judge, fair, steady, unshakable. But that morning, as he cruised down a quiet suburban road, blue and red lights suddenly flared in his rearview mirror. Ellison's brow furrowed. He wasn't speeding, his registration was valid. His taillights worked fine. Still, he eased the car onto the shoulder and waited. The officer who stepped out of the cruiser was Bradley Kane, a tall man with a broad chest and a permanent scowl. Kane had a reputation around the precinct, not for bravery or community service, but for arrogance. He was the kind of cop who viewed every driver as a suspect, every question as an insult. He didn't greet Ellison, didn't explain the stop. He simply barked, "License and registration, now!" The judge obliged. Slowly, carefully, he retrieved his wallet and handed over his license. But Kane didn't bother checking it. Instead, he stared at Ellison, his lip curling. "This car," Kane said, eyeing the polished Mercedes, "doesn't look like it belongs to you." The judge tilted his head, surprised. "Excuse me?" "Brand new ride. Out here in this neighborhood doesn't add up." The judge felt a familiar sting. He had lived long enough to recognize it, the insinuation, the prejudice, but he stayed calm. "Officer Kane," he said evenly, "I am a sitting judge in Fulton County. If you'll run my license, you'll see everything is in order." Kane smirked. "Oh, so now you're somebody important. Everybody's somebody when I pull them over." The encounter escalated quickly. Kane ordered the judge out of the vehicle, ignoring his calm explanations. He forced the judge to place his hands on the hood while he patted him down roughly. "What are you really doing in this neighborhood?" Kane pressed. "Heading home," Ellison replied evenly. "Where'd you get this car? Whose is it?" "It's mine, purchased legally." "Why do you have judicial plates? Did you steal them?" By now, neighbors had started to notice. Curtains twitched. A man walking his dog slowed, pulling out his phone. The camera caught it all. The shouting, the humiliation, the way a respected judge was treated like a criminal. Still, Ellison held his composure. "Officer Kane," he said evenly, "call your supervisor, now." But Kane only smirked wider. "You don't give me orders. Out here, I'm the law."
Minutes later, another cruiser pulled up. Sergeant Linda Chavez stepped out, scanning the scene with narrowed eyes. She froze when she saw the man standing beside the Mercedes. "Judge Ellison?" she stammered. Kane's smirk faltered. "Yes," Ellison replied, his voice calm but edged with steel. "And your officer has made a very serious mistake today." Chavez turned on Kane. "Do you have any idea who this is?" Kane sputtered. He said he was a judge, but you didn't verify? You didn't run his license? You just assumed?" By now, half a dozen phones were recording. The humiliation was documented from every angle. Kane shifted uncomfortably, but it was too late. The damage was done. Ellison straightened his jacket and looked directly at Chavez. "Sergeant, please note your officer's badge number. This will be handled." 3 weeks later, the headlines hit like a thunderclap. Judge Marcus Ellison sues Officer Bradley Kane, Police Department, for $30 million. The lawsuit listed multiple violations: unlawful detention, unlawful search, racial profiling, harassment, and civil rights violations. But the most explosive demand was that qualified immunity, the legal doctrine shielding officers from personal liability, should not apply. The internet erupted. Hashtags trended. Hashtag Justice for Ellison and hashtag End Qualified Immunity. Civil rights activists rallied around the case. To many, Ellison wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for every black man stopped, frisked, and humiliated without cause. But the backlash was fierce. Kane's defenders argued Ellison was exploiting his status. If he wasn't a judge, one commentator sneered, nobody would care. This is about money and politics. Through it all, Ellison stayed silent, refusing interviews. He let the lawsuit speak for itself. Meanwhile, Officer Kane's world collapsed. Suspended without pay, he became a pariah in his own precinct. Fellow officers whispered that he had brought shame on the department. Protesters marched outside his station, chanting, "No immunity, no more cover-ups." At home, Kane grew bitter. In interviews, he painted himself as the victim. "I was just doing my job. How was I supposed to know he was a judge? He disrespected me." But the viral videos told another story, one of arrogance, abuse, and bias. Worse, whispers began to circulate that Kane had a long history of civilian complaints, allegations of profiling, accusations of excessive force, cases quietly buried by the department. The lawsuit threatened to drag those skeletons into the light. The courtroom battle begins. The first pretrial hearing was electric. Reporters packed the gallery. Protesters crowded the courthouse steps. Ellison walked in calmly, his dignity intact. Across the aisle, Kane looked pale and jittery. Angela Brooks, Ellison's lead attorney, wasted no time. She presented the viral videos, eyewitness testimony, and early evidence of Kane's misconduct. Her words rang through the courtroom. "This case is about accountability. A man in uniform humiliated a citizen, detained him without cause, and searched his property unlawfully. That man happened to be a judge." But this lawsuit isn't just for Marcus Ellison. It's for everyone who has suffered the same abuse and been silenced without cause. Today, we ask this court to strip away the shield of qualified immunity and finally hold Officer Kane accountable. Kane's defense fired back, claiming Ellison provoked the stop and exaggerated the encounter for money. But their words seemed hollow against the weight of the evidence. The judge presenting over the hearing admitted the case was extraordinary. Just when it seemed the lawsuit was on steady ground, Ellison's legal team made a discovery that shook the case wide open. Through internal records obtained in discovery, they uncovered memos showing that Kane's superiors had known about his behavior for years. 14 civilian complaints, multiple recommendations for suspension, all ignored, and one chilling note in particular. Judge Ellison is outspoken on civil rights. Kane is aware of this. Ellison stared at the memo in disbelief. This wasn't just negligence. This wasn't just a rogue cop. This was targeted harassment. The revelation rocked the city. Media outlets debated whether the case could end qualified immunity nationwide. Civil rights leaders called it a turning point. But then, on the eve of the next hearing, something terrifying happened. Late at night, Ellison's home security cameras captured a hooded figure approaching his driveway. The man crouched beside the judge's car, working quickly before sprinting away into the darkness. The next morning, Ellison stepped outside to find his tires slashed. Police dismissed it as random vandalism, but Ellison's lawyers disagreed. Angela Brooks studied the footage with grim certainty. "This isn't random. This is a message. Somebody wants you to back off." Ellison stood silently, staring at the ruined tires. For the first time in years, his steady composure cracked. If they were willing to intimidate a sitting judge, what else were they capable of?
That night, as Ellison tucked his daughter into bed, she looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, "are they going to hurt us?" Ellison's throat tightened. He forced a reassuring smile. "No, sweetheart. Daddy won't let anything happen to you." But as he walked back to his study, his mind churned. The threats were escalating. His family was now in danger, and he couldn't shake the question that haunted him. Was Officer Kane acting alone, or was someone far more powerful pulling the strings? The folder on Judge Marcus Ellison's dining table wasn't paper. It was a weapon. Inside were damning documents, internal police emails, buried complaints, and memos signed by city officials. But the final sheet, scrolled in ink, was the most chilling. "Drop the case, Judge, or you won't live to see the verdict." Camille's hands trembled as she pressed the note against her chest. "Marcus, this is bigger than Bradley Kane. You're going against the entire system." Federal Agent Carter bagged the evidence carefully. "This isn't just harassment anymore. It's conspiracy. The question is, do we go forward knowing they want you dead?" Ellison looked from his wife to the agent. His voice was calm, steady. "If I don't, then everything I stand for, everything I swore to uphold, means nothing. We go forward." And so the trial of Ellison versus Kane and Metro Police Department entered a storm that would shake the city to its core. The prosecution's strategy was brutal in its simplicity, proved that Officer Kane didn't act alone, but was protected by a culture of abuse. Angela Brooks, Ellison's fiery attorney, held up one of the documents from the mysterious folder in front of the jury. "This is an internal memo from the department, signed by Captain Riley, instructing officers to use intimidation tactics to maintain control in high-risk neighborhoods. Do you see the words here? Intimidation tactics. That's not policing. That's harassment. That's abuse. And Judge Ellison was their latest target." The defense objected. The judge overruled. The jury leaned forward, hungry for more. Behind closed doors, whispers spread. If Ellison won, this wasn't just about one officer. It was about tearing down decades of unchecked power. Officer Kane had swaggered into court the first day, but by the third week, the arrogance was gone. He sat slumped at the defense table, dark circles under his eyes, watching the walls close in. Finally, in a desperate gamble, he reached out to Angela Brooks. "They're hanging me out to dry," he whispered during a recess. His voice shook. "The department, the council, they told me what to do, told me who to stop, and when complaints came in, they buried them. You think I wanted to pull over a judge? That wasn't me being stupid. That was me following orders." Angela narrowed her eyes. "So you'll testify?" "Yes, if it saves me from prison. But listen, once I talk, I'm a dead man. You don't know these people. They'll kill me before they let me expose them." For the first time, the predator looked like prey. When Kane took the stand, the courtroom was electric. Reporters filled every seat. Cameras flashed outside. Under oath, His voice cracked as he confessed, "I was told to keep certain neighborhoods under constant pressure, to make stops even if there wasn't cause. It kept people scared, kept numbers up. And when I pulled over Judge Ellison, I realized too late I'd gone after the wrong man. But the truth is, I wasn't acting alone. The department told me to do it. The city backed them up." Gasps echoed through the gallery. The defense tried to paint him as a liar, but the emails and memos lined up with his story. Angela pounced. "So when you humiliated Judge Ellison on the side of the road, you weren't acting as an officer of the law. You were acting as a pawn of a corrupt system. Isn't that true?" Kane lowered his eyes. "Yes." The courtroom erupted. After weeks of testimony, the jury returned. The silence was deafening as the foreperson stood. "We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Judge Marcus Ellison, and award damages in the amount of $30 million. The room exploded. Reporters raced out to break the story. Civil rights groups cheered. The ruling didn't just punish Kane and the department, it sent a message across the nation.
But the second part of the verdict was even more shocking. The jury ruled that Officer Kane was not protected by qualified immunity. For decades, that doctrine had shielded officers from lawsuits, allowing misconduct to flourish. Now, in this courtroom, the shield had been shattered. The nation erupted in debate. Could this be the case that opened the floodgates? Would other victims of police abuse now rise to sue? For Marcus Ellison, it wasn't about the money. It was about accountability. And at least for one day, justice had spoken. That night, Ellison's victory rally turned into chaos. As he left the courthouse surrounded by supporters, a sharp crack echoed from a nearby rooftop. A bullet whizzed past, slamming into a lamppost. Panic erupted. Federal agents shoved Ellison into a waiting SUV, shielding him with their bodies. Later, Agent Carter's face was grim. That wasn't a warning shot. That was an execution attempt. Someone up the chain is furious and scared. Camille clutched her husband's hand. "Marcus, how far are they willing to go?" Ellison's gaze hardened. "As far as they must, but so will we." Days later, the FBI struck back. In a sweeping pre-dawn raid, federal agents stormed police headquarters and several city offices. The chief of police was led out in handcuffs. 2 captains were indicted. 3 city council members were charged with conspiracy. The city descended into chaos. Trust in its institutions collapsed overnight. And yet, amid the wreckage, a new hope flickered. Citizens poured into the streets, not in protest, but in solidarity. Signs read, "Justice for all," and "End qualified immunity." Judge Ellison, ever composed, addressed the press. "This isn't my victory. This is our victory. For every person humiliated, harassed, or silenced by those sworn to protect them. But understand this, the fight isn't over. Corruption doesn't vanish overnight. It hides, it waits, and it strikes back." Months later, when life seemed to calm, Ellison returned home one evening to find a package on his porch. Inside was a single police badge, scorched and scratched. Beneath it lay a note. "This isn't over." Ellison stared at it in silence. The storm had been won, but the war was far from finished. Somewhere in the shadows, the machine was still alive. And Judge Marcus Ellison knew he had just become its most dangerous enemy. And that's where our story ends, for now.
A black judge stood up to a corrupt cop, a corrupt department, and an entire corrupt city, and won a $30 million verdict that shook the nation. But even in victory, powerful enemies still lurk in the shadows. Will Judge Ellison stand inspire lasting change, or will the system strike back harder than ever? Let me know in the comments section. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit the bell icon right now, because the fight for justice is far from over.